All right, it's 4 o'clock. Good afternoon. I'm Gwen Gamble. I'm here representing Sunriver U, who is offering the owners forum today on the topic of the proposed tree protection plan. And today we have with us Richard Look, who is the design committee chairman, and Keith Caceres, who is the assistant general manager for SROA. And I'm going to turn it over to you, gentlemen, who will present what the proposed plan is. If anybody watching has a question, please type your question in the chat to Sunriver U. I will filter the questions. A lot of times questions overlap the same topic, and so we might not ask your question with the exact wording, but it's been asked 3 ways, and we morph it into one general question that should address the actual concern. If you have comments, this is not the place for your comments. Comments can be sent directly to the design committee, or you can write them and we will screenshot them and send them via our forum. But just know that I'm not going to read out comments. I'll read out questions. But first, we have the presentation, then we'll have the question answer session. So Richard, Keith, over to you.
Yes, I'm Richard Look of the design committee, and of course next to me is Keith Caceres. And our topic, or what we're going to present, deals with a tree protection plan. The idea of it really goes back a couple of years ago when the board wanted to kind of revise the design manual, and that it took a couple of years. I think it was about 18 months, 24 meetings. No meeting was less than 3 hours, and then we kind of came up with a new design manual. Now, in one area under landscaping, which was 3.18 AF, there states shall not use cages, wire mesh, or fencing to protect trees, shrubs, perennials, grasses, ground cover, or other vegetation. I think the board felt that some form of tree protection was something they wanted or wanted us to look into, so they asked the design committee if we could do that. And so we had a few meetings about it, and eventually we did come up with it, and this is something we will present to you. In order to get to that, an extensive amount of research was done via neighboring community staff, online, in-person shopping visits, phone conversations we used Great Basin Nursery, Sunriver Nature Center, Sunriver Fire Department, and we had owner input. And it was conducted throughout this multiple months process. The following rationale, we had rationale for it, but we'd rather present the actual tree plan itself that we have submitted to the board at their last minute meeting. They decided at the meeting that they wanted to table it for 2 months so that people could look at it. It was posted in the scene. It was posted online. So that's kind of where we are right now. Keith, do you want to talk about the exhibits?
Yes, in 1 second, we'll share a screen with you all so you can see the actual proposed rules that are planned for section 3.18 of the landscaping section of the new design manual. But just wanted to add a couple things to what Richard was saying. Wanted to let you all know this has been a process that, as he said, has been in place for over a couple of years. And the restriction that came out of the new design manual that came out on June 15th, as Richard noted, did not allow for any protections of trees, plants, et cetera, protecting with certain wire cages or any sort of physical protection barrier. So the board, based on, as what Richard said, based on a lot of owner input, that came into us, they wanted us to relook at that rule and see if the rule could be a little bit more flexible to allow some opportunities for owners to protect trees that they felt were of value to their property. And so when that came back to the design committee to discuss, there was multiple meetings and then there was a presentation made to the board, as Richard noted. But there's enough information to owner comment that we wanted to make sure that all owners had the opportunity to understand what the newly proposed rule would be. So that's why we're sitting here today. And right now we're in the middle of a 60-day read process from the decision at the meeting on December 15th that the board had up until it'll go all the way until February 17th will be the last day for owners to submit comment. When those comments come in, they will also get forwarded to the design committee and the board of directors. And at that point, on February 17th, they will review those comments and suggestions that came from owners if any additional comments come in. So at this point, what we'd like to do, we would love to show you kind of an exhibit of what the proposal is for this section. And the section is broken down by deer browsing, so activity of the deer in your property, and also by beaver and porcupine. So there's we developed two different criterias that would focus on each of those individual wildlife potentially coming through your property. So give me 1 second, let me load that screen for you. This moderator, Gwen, just want to make sure that you all can see the screen. Richard, would you like to take it away?
Sure. So they can see the screen, right?
Yes.
So this is the proposed new language to replace section 3.18F of the existing SROA Design Committee Manual of Rules and Procedures. And I did read before what it currently says, which says, shall not use cages, wire mesh, or fencing to protect trees, shrubs, perennials, grasses, ground cover, or other vegetation. So in essence, the only thing you could really use would be sprays, liquid sprays. So under tree protection browsing, this is going to become the new 3.18C. Number 1, only trees are allowed to be protected with a physical barrier as noted per this section. No physical protection barrier is allowed for perennials, grasses, ground cover, shrubs, or other vegetation. Property owners are encouraged to utilize non-barrier options such as liquids or sprays and motion sensor sprinklers that may work to warn off wildlife from grazing. Number 2, continuous welded wire physical tree protection barriers are the only form of physical barrier that is allowed for individual or grouping of trees. They are not to exceed 48 inches in diameter, maximum surrounding the trees. The continuous welded wire physical tree protection material must be either galvanized, non-reflective, dark green, or black in color, and a minimum 14 gauge. Number 4, the continuous welded wire physical tree protection pattern opening shall be either 2 inches by 3 inches or 2 inches by 4 inches openings only. Number 5, each welded wire physical tree protection barrier shall begin at ground level and shall not exceed 5 feet in height at the top of the barrier. Number 6, a minimum of 6 feet spacing is required between each continuous welded wire physical tree protection barrier. Number 7, continuous welded wire physical tree protection barrier support posts shall not exceed 4 support posts per barrier, shall be no higher than the barrier itself, and shall be either natural wood 2 by 2 inch maximum, which would be sort of a square, or 2 inch diameter maximum wooden stakes, which would actually be round, or T-post in either dark green or black material. A T-post, people probably know it's a post where the bottom part has kind of flanges. So when you drive that into the ground, it actually helps to increase the retention. Number 8, 5 continuous welded wire physical tree protection barriers maximum on each individual tax lot. Individual tax lots may be allowed to have more than 5 continuous welded wire tree protection barriers per property upon design committee approval and at the direct discretion of the design committee. So it isn't a hard and fast, you can only have 5. There can be exceptions that people could apply for. Number 9, continuous welded wire physical tree protection barriers are allowed to remain in place for up to 4 years from the date of installation. Any deviation from these guidelines must be approved by the design committee at their discretion. Number 10, in the existing physical tree, plant, grass, ground cover, or shrub protection barrier in place on private property that has exceeded 4 years as of July 1st, 2024 must be removed. Any existing non-approved physical tree, plant, grass, ground cover, or shrub protection barrier that doesn't meet the above rules, regardless of maximum timeline, must be removed as of July 1, 2024. Number 11, each continuous welded wire physical tree protection barrier shall be installed and maintained as per items 2 through 10 noted above and section 4.02 of the Sunriver Rules and Regulations. Number 12, no electrified barriers of any kind allowed. Number 13, design committee approval is required for continuous welded wire physical protection barrier per the rules defined in this section of any trees not listed in Appendix F of the manual. Appendix F, when it comes to trees, they have the names and pictures of, I think it's 12 trees that are considered very acceptable. Other trees could be used, they would just need approval. Now that's the first for deer browsing, and then the second tree protection deals with beavers and porcupines, which is going to become the new 3.18D. Beavers are primarily in a very limited area of Sunriver, but they do exist along with porcupines. Number 1, no physical protection barriers allowed for perennials, grasses, ground cover, shrubs, or other vegetation. Property owners are encouraged to utilize non-barrier options such as liquids or sprays and motion sensor sprinklers that may work to warn off wildlife from grazing and chewing. Number 2, continuous welded wire physical tree protection barriers are the only form of physical protection barrier that is allowed for individual or groupings of trees. Each protection barrier shall be between a minimum 4 inches and a maximum 12 inches away from the trunk of the tree. Staking is recommended but not required. Number 3, the continuous welded wire physical tree protection barrier material must be either galvanized, which is non-reflective, dark green, or black in color, and a minimum 14 gauge wire. Number 4, the continuous welded wire physical tree protection pattern opening shall be either 2 by 3 or 2 by 4 inches opening, which is the same as for deer. Number 5, each continuous welded wire physical tree protection barrier is required to extend from the ground to 4 feet in height and not to exceed 4 feet in height. Number 6, continuous welded wire physical tree protection barrier support posts shall not exceed 4 support posts per barrier, shall be no higher than the barrier itself, and shall be either natural wood 2 by 2 inches maximum or 2-inch diameter maximum wooden stakes or T-posts in either dark green or black metal. Number 7, in the existing non-approved physical tree, plant, grass, ground cover, or shrub protection barrier that doesn't meet the above rules, regardless of maximum timeline, must be removed as of July 1st, 2024. Number 8, each continuous welded wire physical tree protection barrier shall be installed and maintained as per items 2 through 7 noted above and section 4.02 of the Sun River Rules and Regulations. Number 9, no electrified barriers of any kind are allowed. And number 10, design committee approval is required for physical protection per the rules defined in this section of any tree not listed in Appendix F of the manual. There's 2 new definitions. Number 1, definition of a tree. We would refer people to Appendix F of this manual, which was compiled by SROA's Natural Resource Department for a verified listing of trees that are adaptable to the Central Oregon environment. Number 2, definition of a physical tree protection barrier. It is a continuous welded minimum 14 gauge thickness wire that is moldable to wrap around a tree for protection from wildlife grazing, chewing, and climbing. The color of the welded wire can only be galvanized, dark green, or black. That is it all. So some of it can be a little confusing, but and that's where, if we have questions, maybe we can clarify.
And some of the language, I want to add one thing too. Some of the language you see is consistent between deer browsing and also beaver and porcupine, except for the size of the welded wire protection barrier. And some of that is and just so there's consistency in the manual. But we do know that the wildlife treat those trees differently between whether they're a deer, a beaver, or porcupine. And so that's why we did extensive research to find out the differences between those, to make sure we're submitting the right, the committee was submitting the right information as a proposed rule.
You can start my video. Okay, we're working at getting my video going. Are you two ready to entertain questions?
Sure.
Okay, the first question is, and remember, everybody in the community is bringing their questions, and I'm just reading what's sent. So here we go. What initiated this war on wildflowers and expenditure of energy, time, and cost?
I guess we could each answer that. A war on wildflowers. I don't really understand what they're talking about. There is no war on wildflowers.
No, so I think where this, so once again, the original manual that was prior to June 15th, 2023, which is a manual we've been working with for 30 plus years. If you wanted to protect your trees, plants, shrubs, etc., it was not an automatic approval. You had to go through approval of the design committee to do that. When the task force got together and discussed all the different changes to the manual, which were a litany of changes to make it more efficient and easier for people to apply for projects, what came up multiple times was about protecting, whether it's protecting the aesthetic value of having wire cages in Sun River. And so when that was determined, it came that what the design committee looked at as a task force was that trees hold a significant monetary value in Sun River. And when it was presented to the board of directors, they said, we want you to focus on trees, not focus on shrubs or wildflowers, because those kind of can come and go seasonally. Wildflowers can. Trees are here usually for a much longer period unless there's damage to the tree, a storm, etc. So that was kind of the direction that we got from the board, was to focus on trees, not to focus on plants or shrubs or wildflowers.
Also, I'm a firm believer that liquid sprays, in fact, work on vegetation. I extensively, completely redid our landscaping around our house about 5 years ago, and we used no barriers. As a matter of fact, for the first 3 years, I didn't even use sprays. And yes, the deer did browse on some of the leaves, and they did rub their antlers on the trees, and they did take off a lot of the bark, but none of the trees died. They all seemed to thrive. I did start using sprays a couple of years ago because I had about 3 different plants, which I never knew what the flower looked like because every time it got to the bud stage, the deer would eat the bud, would eat that. So I finally started spraying, and now I know what they look like. But I mean, I've kind of heard that somebody was saying that the sprays don't work on wildflowers. I'm not sure where that's coming from. Plus, I do believe in the thing that if you want to avoid the deer browsing on your flowers, maybe you shouldn't plant flowers that the deer like. I have, I mean, I invite anybody, well, not now, but in the summer to come and look at what we've planted. But there's things like, I have catmint. I have that is, to me, it's almost becoming a weed around my house, and lavender. Oh, I don't know. I can name a bunch of other things. It really hasn't been much of a problem. I have, so there is no war. And I know of somebody in here who plants a lot of wildflowers in their yard. And yes, the deer do eat some of them, but there's a lot of them they don't touch. So I could probably put somebody in to connect with this person, who I think is very knowledgeable in that area.
Okay.
I hope that, okay.
Yes, so we're having technical difficulties with my video, but I will continue to ask questions if you guys can hear okay.
Sure.
All right. The next question is, will the design committee follow up with responses to questions that don't get answered during this forum today? And that is part of our procedure. We send all comments and questions on to the design committee and to Keith, and they can follow up. So you guys know that, right? Okay.
Yeah.
Sure, that's fine, sure.
All right. Next question. Why are these rules being implemented? Why does it matter?
Look at each. Go ahead, Keith. I'll let you start.
Oh, no, I didn't, I mean, it kind of goes back to my answer earlier, is that it wasn't, these rules have been in place for a long time. In the past, they just required an approval from the design committee. And during the task force meetings, as we discussed, we met over 18 months, 24 meetings. And during those meetings, what kept coming up was aesthetic value of Sunriver, consistency. So when the board came to us and said, look, we'd like for you all to provide some flexibility to allow owners to protect trees, the rule came out, the reason the rule is written this way is to provide consistency. So if people do want to protect those trees in their property, if they meet the conditions of this rule, which are only 14 gauge wire, certain color wiring, all of that, is so there is consistency. So you don't see wire mesh nets compared to the welded wire that we're suggesting, our design committee is suggesting here. So it was really for aesthetic consistency in the community itself.
Yeah, I would say that is my feeling too. I have had an opportunity to drive through other planned communities like Caldera Springs, Crosswater, Brasada Ranch, Pronghorn. There's about 6 of them I've been through. And one of the things that I noted in most of it is a lack of protection around anything. And so now, let's see, it's Caldera, which doesn't allow anything, if I'm correct.
Correct.
Crosswater does allow it, but I didn't see it. And it's my understanding in talking to an owner that part of the homeowner's fees goes towards landscape maintenance. So I would assume that over the years, if they did have them, they took them off. But now Keith has seen it on the fairway. He has seen some protections around trees. So for me, it's an aesthetic thing. We want the community to look as good as it can, and I think not having a lot of wire cages around things, I think looks a lot better. That's my answer.
Okay. We're going to move on to the next question. And this is dealing with the 5 trees per owner lot. Since the lots vary in size, How is 5 trees an equitable limit to all owners?
So if you go back and if we can, I can scroll to that section here. Give me 1 second.
Yep.
Richard.
Oh, yeah. That is not. Well, there was certainly a lot of discussion about how many, and this was definitely a consensus about it. But certainly, we can read that again. 5 continuous welded wire physical tree protection barriers maximum on each individual tax lot. Individual tax lots may be allowed to have more than 5 continuous welded wire tree protection barriers per property upon design committee approval. And at the discretion of the design committee. There's certainly, there are bigger lots, there are new homes being built. And when a new home is being built and they want to put in a lot of trees on their landscape plan, we're probably going to let them have more barriers. But it was a consensus, but it isn't the hard and fast, you can only have 5.
That's why the flexibility was written into number 8 of that section of the proposal for the manual.
Okay, and why only trees? Deer eat everything.
Richard, you want to take it or you want me to take it?
Well, my answer to that is, I mean, the simple answer is if you don't want deer eating your shrubs and flowers, then don't plant stuff that they like to eat. That's the simple answer. But we do allow sprays, and I believe they work because I've used it, and it doesn't take much on a plant. The deer, in my opinion, I don't think that they're deterred by the fact that you've sprayed something on it. I think they're deterred more from the smell of it. I even thought about if I put in a new tree, maybe spray part of the tree and see if that deterred them. All right, Keith.
Yeah, and also this came back to a discussion so the presentation prior to the most recent one that was presented to the board of directors, that kicked off the idea in that originally that made the board put a stay on this rule and not to imply the rule yet. When that discussion happened with the board, some of the feedback we received from the board at that time was people perceived significant financial value in trees of their home. Obviously, if someone has to have a tree removed due to damage, we know there's a cost for that to happen, and it's usually pretty expensive. So the board of directors looked at it as they knew that there's a financial impact for trees on private property. And so that's the reason the direction came back to the design committee from the board to provide that financial, basically provide some stability there to allow owners to protect trees because of the financial impact of trees on property.
Okay, thank you. I think this might be a typo, but the real question is what kind of spread, but I think it might be spray, is being used? And I've never used a spray that works. And who's going to be policing the use of cages? So, Richard, maybe
they're saying
about your spread.
that they spray. I don't know that I'm going to name a specific product, but I know of 3 different ones, and I've used 2 of them. I'm just curious. Well, if they said it didn't work, I'm not going to question that, but it certainly worked for me. And I've talked to several people that have used them and found them effective. They're readily available. I guess maybe off of this, if somebody contacted me, I might give them a name of a product.
Fair
but
enough.
I don't.
Gwen, what was the second part of that question? There was 2 parts I thought you said to the question.
Yeah. Who's going to police this?
Yes. So the enforcement would come from our community development department. So we have 2 co-design review planners at their job when they're out in the field. Not only they're out there looking at new submittals or project finals or property for sale inspections, but they're also out there reviewing compliance issues as well, and or neighbor concerns. So if we get a call from a neighbor saying someone has got the wrong type of physical tree protection barrier up, they can go out and take a look at it and educate that owner on what is allowed.
Great. And I'm glad you said educate, because it's a learning process for all of us. All right.
Without question, yes.
And not that many people actually use cages. So why do we even have it in the manual, or can we take it out of the manual?
If it's taken out of the manual, then that means that the current rule that's in place now, which would allow zero protection, is what would stay in the manual. So without this flexibility written into the rule, no one will be able to protect trees, plants, shrubs, or anything based on the way the current rule is stated.
Okay. Just reiterate this. The design committee, have you reviewed evaluation on sunriverneighbors.org? Yeah. So has the design committee reviewed the evaluation on sunriverneighbors.org?
I don't think I have. I occasionally look at it. I think my wife looks at it more than I do, but after being personally denigrated, said I was psychologically unstable to be a design committee chairman and other things, I just decided I'm not going on there.
So Gwen, what you're referring to is a social media, it's a portion of a social media app. No, the design committee, as far as I know, I mean, unless individually they reviewed it, I don't think they've seen it collectively as a whole.
I guess I'm not sure what they're talking about then.
Okay, thank you. No, you answered the question. People are cutting trees in my property, and I use small plant barriers to protect wildflower plantings. How does the design committee suggest protecting my plants from humans?
I'm not sure if, we need some more context on this question, but it sounds like what they may be referring to is part of our ladder fuel reduction plan, where basically we go into 1/6 of the community every year and do ladder fuel reduction on SROA common owned property called SROA Commons. So that could be what the owner is referring to, that they're trying to provide some sort of physical barrier protection once those trees are removed on common to allow a little more privacy for their property. But it goes back to what Richard was saying earlier. There's sprays available. You can use, if someone wanted to have, a sprinkler system that was on a sensor, that's a possibility as well to protect those groupings of wildflowers that they're referring to and or plantings.
Okay.
But I don't like, I'm just reading into that question because I don't know exactly, that question is not completely clarified, so it's hard for us to answer that.
Right. And if whoever wrote that question wants to write any clarifying questions, they are certainly welcome to put that in the chat, and we'll readdress it. Would SROA consider protecting shrubs, not just trees, in the interest of feeding birds and insects? I do not live in Sunriver full time, so spraying, which is not as effective as a physical barrier, is not an option. I have a spraying tip I can share.
Go ahead, because
I saw this over at one of the condo groups. They actually put like cloth on the branch of the tree or the shrub and sprayed the cloth so the scent would linger longer. It's just something I saw.
Well, I've heard that too, Gwen. I don't know, but I have heard that people who are not here very often, I can't say how long, if I spray a bush, how long will that last? I don't know. But for me, when I probably spray every other week, unless they could get somebody to do it for them, they're right, it's tougher. And I have heard that cloth strip works. I mean, I look at it a little bit from an aesthetic point, do I want a lot of cloth strips hanging around? But I guess that is an option.
So to answer another part of that question was asked, why are shrubs not considered? As I'm getting back to my comment earlier, when the board came in direction to design committee, was for them to go back and provide a flexibility for the rule regarding trees only. So that's where that came from.
Okay, we're going back to the 5-tree max. The 5-tree max has flexibility, cannot be enforced as the consolidated plan requires. So how can a rule on the onset be unclear? I think it's the clarity of the flexibility is the question.
We'd have to do some more research on that, Gwen, to answer that. I
Okay.
don't have the consolidated plan sitting in front of me right now.
I will hang on to that question for you and make sure
Sure.
it gets pushed back to your committee. Okay,
Sure.
why not have an owner's vote on tree protection?
Uh,
I can take that. So we have probably, oh, there's roughly, let me count real quickly. Hang on one second. There is 35 pages of text in the new design manual plus multiple appendixes. And I think it's not been done in SROA to where in the past you would pick out one section of the manual and have an individual vote on that. Basically, when the design committee presented the new manual to the board of directors, they looked at it as an entire manual as a whole. To give an opportunity, there was a 60-day read period there as well, once the manual was presented to the board of directors for review. And during that 60-day read, there were comments that we gave owners the opportunity to provide comment on any section of the manual they wanted. And this was one of the sections of the manual that had more communication back to the committee. And that was one of the reasons why the board of directors at that time decided not to implement this section 3.18 of the sec 3.18F of the manual at that time until more research was done. In reference to at this point, there's never been a vote on an individual single item such as that. It would have to go through an entire voting process, which is a pretty major expense to SROA to do that, to reach out to all 4,000 property owners. So it just hasn't been something that the board has directed as they want us to do at this point. We can definitely take it under consideration, but at this point, that has not been the pattern that has been used in the past on something as simple as one item out of a design committee manual.
Okay, so in line with that same question is why not have the owners vote on shrub protection? So that falls in line with the tree protection voting. Owners voting.
That's something that we would have to, as a design committee, would have to bring back these questions to the board of directors. That'd be a call from the board of directors, not from the design committee, to make that decision, whether they would want to go to a vote of the owners on one or either of those two topics.
Right. Any suggestions on where to buy the wire mesh?
Well, we had one person who went around to lots of places, and it's pretty readily available. And in the suggestion of the 14 gauge and the 2x2 inch or 2x4 inch, that's 2x3, I'm sorry, and 2x4, that just seemed to be readily available. I bet if you went to Lowe's or any Home Depot,
Camp Abbott,
locally, yes.
So the research was done by our committee that went around to make sure that there was product that was ready available. And that was one of the reasons why this size gauge and this type of style of protection barrier was submitted as a portion of the rule, because of the readiness of the availability.
All right.
Locally.
All right. So is there a place where there is a photo or an example of what this continue wires mesh looks like, maybe even wrapped around a tree with the stakes? Like, can people find photo examples?
What we could do is we could add photos to our website. If that's something that people would like to see, that might be the easiest way to do it. That's something we can look at. No problem doing that at all. We don't have it right here in front. I don't have it as an example today to show you. But we can definitely make that as an option.
Right. The other thing is you know how you have the sample paint board at SROA for paint colors? Some people are asking, like, is it possible that the mesh samples could be available if they came into the office so they could see what they're shopping for before they go shopping? For us visual people.
Right. sure, I don't see why we couldn't do that. I mean, that's something we could have available. It would, be a smaller piece, obviously, because it'd be hard to
Right.
store that much material, but sure, that can be something we can have on site as well.
All right. And have you considered a protection for wildflowers?
Thank you for the question as well. It gets back to the answer I provided earlier, was that the board gave us direction to look at tree protection only. So at this point, no, there's not been any future discussion on wildflowers protection.
Okay, do we have any other questions coming in? All right. So some of the questions here are kind of in reference to follow-up. How can owners submit comments prior to the February date?
Yes, and clarity there, the date is, I said February 17th earlier, it's actually February 14th is actually the 60 day. They would just submit them to info, SROA, right? Design info.
Or either, but design info is where it's going.
Okay, design info at srowners.org. So it's design info at srowners.org. And that will get submitted, and that will be put in the, basically the binder, that's a 60-day read binder. So all the comments that come in will get submitted to the design committee and the board of directors consistently.
Okay, oh, we have another question.
Sure.
What is the Oregon State University Extension Service guidance on deer proofing a garden or property?
That I'd have to do some more research on that, but there's 13 different research websites, articles that the committee itself reviewed and went through. And I'd have to look back and see if there's one specific to that website you're referring to. There are there's a website called oregon.gov/document/forest benefits facts sheet on porcupines, for example. So we went through a lot of those different, whether it's at the Oregon state level, the federal level. We wanted to review as much as possible, the committee did, to make sure that they were getting as much background information as possible before they submitted. But if you can tell me the name of the website again, or you say it again, Gwen.
Oregon's OSU Extension Service.
Okay. We'll take a look at that. I don't think that's one specifically that the committee looked at, but that's something we can definitely look at.
Great. Okay, thank you. And then just a follow-up for people, where are all the questions submitted and answers posted after this forum? So the questions are submitted here through the forum. But where are the answers going to be posted anywhere? Other than, just so everyone knows, this is a YouTube video you can watch and send to your friends later. Do you guys have any other way that this is shared?
We can refer to that.
We can refer to your link on, for your YouTube video, but we don't have, since we're not running this YouTube, we don't have ability to record it and send any additional information.
But Sunriver U does record all owner forums, and they are all available on YouTube. And it would probably be not before tomorrow. If, yeah, it takes some time to get that posted. But as soon as it's posted, you can share it with all of your owner friends or review it for yourself, just for all of our listeners. Okay, so about enforcement of the cages and such around plants, how much staff time is required to enforce all of this?
It all depends on how much protection is out there, how many different owners decide to utilize the rule, if the rule gets approved, to utilize this rule to protect their trees on their property. So it's one of the, so basically it would be something that we as staff would go out and monitor, but it truly depends on the number that decide to do it.
Okay, thank you. And we have another question coming in. Normally my video is on, and it's interesting doing this without watching body language and getting this done. All right, we have another question here. Is there a size restriction for shrub protection?
A size?
So
Yeah.
once again, this rule is written for trees, not shrubs. So I don't really the committee didn't discuss it because it wasn't tied to potential rule for shrubs themselves.
Okay, so clarifying that. Um, okay, bear with me. This is a long question, and if you need clarifying, I'll go back and reread it. Has the board of directors been presented with the records that the SROA has received where owners of 65 Sunriver homes submitted comments opposing the strict restrictions on plant protections in the proposed rules of owners, plus 2 Sunriver homes submitted comments supporting the proposed rules? So does the board know about people who have submitted comments opposing the restrictions?
Yes, yes, because we know the board received some postcards that were sent out to certain owners. That ones that came back to SROA. So those had been received here at SROA. Whether that each individual board member has reviewed them, I can't answer that. I can't speak for the board, so I do not know. But we do know those have been received.
Okay. Oh, and we, sorry here, just a second. We have another question coming through the hotline. I'm watching it be typed. Okay. Have there been any master gardeners involved in the discussions? Oregon State does a master garden training program, and there's some master gardeners in the area.
Oh, what would you consider Great Basin Nursery?
So, I mean, I will tell you that's one of the resources, Great Basin Nursery, which is in Bend. They've supplied a lot of owners that purchase trees from that nursery. They've supplied trees that are familiar with Central Oregon landscape here. And so it was the owner directly that we were speaking with Great Basin Nursery that provided a lot of this background and expertise for us. Do I know if she's a master gardener? I am not sure, but she's owner of a large nursery in Bend. And also the Sunriver Nature Center. We had a lot of contact with the Nature Center as well. And the individual we spoke with there, he's the director of ecological horticulture and operations. So that's his background, and he's has a degree in horticultural. So that's where we got a lot of that information submitted to us, as well as background material to provide as substance for these future rules.
Right. So you have used experts, local experts.
Yes, correct.
Okay. We just have another question being written up here for you. And just so everyone knows, if you have comments, could you tell people how they can submit comments or questions if they want to email you directly?
Well, the email address we gave out a few minutes ago is the email address to reach us. That's how it'll get to us.
Okay.
designinfo@srowners.org.
Okay. And do board members see those questions and comments as well?
If it's comments that are sent to that website address, that email address that are part of, and then they noted as part of the 60-day read comment period, they're submitting on this topic, yes, those will get shared with the board of directors as well.
All right. We have some definitions requested. How are the following crucial terms defined? What is a physical barrier?
So the question that just came through, the committee itself has not had a chance to review that, but that was a question that came through that was presented during the 60-day read period. So that'll go to the design committee and the board of directors. And once all those comments have been submitted, the board will start reviewing and going through those comments at that time.
Okay, so
what we have defined is a definition in this section of the proposed rule that talks about a physical tree protection barrier. So there's not been a definition defined yet as a physical barrier. That's something the committee can look at, but they have not had an opportunity to look at that yet because there's other comments coming in as well.
Okay, what about a grouping of trees? Is that defined?
That has not been defined yet either. No, it was not defined in what was submitted to the board of directors. But that is something that, once again, that is something that the committee and or board can look at. Once all those questions have been submitted, they will review each individual question and work on providing a response to those that they warrant a response for.
Okay. How about any information on the diameter of rectangles or oval shapes other than circle or ellipse?
I assume that individual is talking about the openings, the potential opening of the wire protection itself. That's something that hasn't been discussed, that type of shape. Part of the reason why the 2x2 and 2x3 came about was those are readily available in a wire mesh, in a welded wire that you would find at Ace Hardware, Home Depot, Lowe's, etc. So that was the reason, and the consistency is the reason for it as well too. We wanted to make sure that there is consistency throughout the community in regards to aesthetics, and that was the reason for kind of the more specific rule on the 2x2 and 2x3.
Okay. How about, can you, we're getting quite. Oh my gosh, I have no idea what's going on. Sorry about the barking dog. Are,
It's barely, we can barely hear it.
It's all
okay,
good.
It's
Okay.
okay.
so we're getting back to shrub protection. And we're getting questions about rules about shrub protection. Can you just go back to like the groundworks on where are we with shrub protection?
Well, I can say that we haven't even considered it. Well, I mean, okay, do you want me to read again? What the? Okay, let's go back to number 1 under tree protection. No physical protection barriers allowed for perennials, grasses, ground cover, shrubs, or other vegetation. Property owners are encouraged to utilize non-barrier options such as liquids or sprays and motion sensor sprinklers. So I guess that's our answer.
Great, thank you so much. You clarified that. Okay. The diameter question was regarding the diameter of the surrounding fencing. Can it be a different shape than just a circle? I'm trying to find the diameter of rectangles. Oh, like if somebody wants to do a rectangle or an oval other than a circle or ellipse around their tree's trunk. Like, are they going to get in trouble if it's a rectangle instead of a circle?
Well, I personally would say no. I mean, I think sometimes, especially if you're doing a little grouping, sometimes that might be a little irregular. But we're just looking for, if we converted that rectangle into a circle, would it be approximately 48 inches? So yeah, we probably would have to sort of eyeball it a little bit.
And part of that, Gwen, gets back to consistency in the community. The more consistent, the more that it blends into the natural environment versus stands out. So the intent of that rule is for it to blend and be consistent within the community itself.
Good.
Thank you. So like the aesthetic look throughout the community is,
Yes.
I'm hearing, is important.
Yes.
All right. More questions. All right. At this point, we don't have any. Oh, wait. I was just going to wrap it up. And a question just is coming in. So bear with us a minute.
Sure, no problem.
Yeah. All righty. Oh, the question of the word enforcement and what enforcement really means. Does this mean fines? What are the fines? Earlier you said education.
So SROA always, the goal is always to start out with education, to making sure the owner is aware of what the actual rule is, and then making sure that they apply the rule appropriately on their private property. So we always start out with education first. So at this point, the goal is to have a discussion with the owner, have them realize that what they have put on their property may not exactly meet the rule, and give them an opportunity to make a correction so they can come in compliance with the rule itself.
All right. And how do you measure the diameter?
How would you measure the diameter
Of the circle around
of a
the,
circle?
Yeah.
Well, you can. Well, there's of course different geometry equations where you could take the circumference and then get back to that. But roughly, I mean, if you take a tape measure and go from one side, round to the other, I think you're gonna get pretty close to the diameter of a circle. And of course, we would like it to be as, circular in nature, but we understand that not everyone is going to be that way. I don't know. I mean, I can't say in the enforcement, are we going to go out and measure? I'm not involved in enforcement, so I can't really answer that.
Okay, and we just have another question coming here. Okay. Thank you for your patience here.
Sure.
How is the committee justifying prohibiting protection of wildflowers when the consolidated plan of Sun River explicitly enshrines wildflowers as a community treasure?
This question seems to be coming up over and over here tonight. So if you have a wildflower out somewhere and what if the deer eats them? Is that, I mean, how do, again, I could go back to look, spray them. There's not going to be any enclosures around them. Okay, I don't know how many more times I could say that.
So that's where in reference to under item number 1 under tree protection, there is a recommendation there from the committee as part of the rule, looking at the proposed rule, is there's other ways that you can protect those wildflowers versus putting individual wire welded cages around them.
So does the person asking the question, do they feel like the only way they can protect a wildflower is through some type of barrier, wire barrier?
Honestly, I have no idea. And that would be a question for that person. And perhaps whoever is concerned about that could come visit you, Richard, and see what you've done, because it sounds like you've tackled some of these issues about wildflowers and not caging them. Would the new rules apply to all Sun River properties, including the Nature Center, plantings at Mary McCallum, and the golf courses?
Yes, I mean, they're all part of Sun River Owners Association. They're all part, whether you are the resort, they're a commercial property owner in Sun River, whether you're an individual property owner, single family home, or if you're a condominium or townhome association, yes, it's all part of SROA. In some capacity, and they have to abide by the rules and regulations of the community and the design manual itself. So yes, it would be applied equally.
Okay, and the trees around the SROA buildings, are they protected? Do they have?
Nope, not at all. Not at all. Yep. And they're still there and they're surviving. Because we do spray them though. They are sprayed.
I did notice, I'm just waiting for another question to come in here, but I noticed that there were some new plantings down along the riverbank at Mary McCallum. Those, do you know what those plants are? And I didn't miss any protection.
Well, let's see. I'm trying to think. Well, Gwen and I were part of the 20 Below Club in Sun River, which is for people who have dogs under 20 pounds. And we've been meeting at Mary McCallum most of the summer into the fall. But of course, now with the rain, we're going to meet somewhere else. But honestly, I could probably find out. There may be somebody that knows what was planted there.
I'm just noticing they planted them without protection. And, clearly somebody felt that that was a good, safe shrub to plant without needing protection, because there's certainly a lot of deer down there.
Yeah, and beavers and porcupines.
Yes.
Yeah, true. Not on the river, yes.
Okay, so,
Yeah,
I'm sorry, we have another question here about the vine maples. Are vine maples considered a tree or a shrub?
Well, it's definitely, yeah, I guess I hate to use the word depends, but it could be either.
We'd have to look, let me look into.
But it
give me
is-
just a second.
It is under the tree section though. Under appendix F.
Yeah, that's what I'm looking at right now.
See, there's multi-stems and single stems.
So vine maple is not noted currently on our tree appendix F.
No, they demonstrate as more of a shrub here, and they're not native.
So they're not native to Sun River, and they come off as more of a shrub versus than a tree itself. So it's actually listed on our appendix F under shrubs. It's listed as vine maple there, not under trees.
Okay. And we have two more questions coming in here. They're typing as I get ready to read them for you. So vine maples are not native to Sun River, though we see them around here. Okay, let's see. Would every owner have to apply for a variance for quaking aspens?
In regards to protecting them, or what is their question?
In regard for
Or just
protecting, no, for protecting quaking aspens.
No, you wouldn't have to, because I mean, if the tree's on your property and you're looking at wanting to protect that as one of your 5 protections you're allowed, then you have that opportunity.
Great. Okay, we're just gonna take a breath here as another question's coming in. It's a long question. Just bear with us here a minute. So in what reference could people find quaking aspens listed as a tree? Are they in? We have somebody who says they're not listed as a tree.
Well,
It's not recommended.
just because they're not listed doesn't mean, I mean, they can certainly apply for that. I mean, it is definitely something that's not recommended in Sun River, but that doesn't mean they can't do it.
So it's definitely, it's under the not recommended, it's not under the prohibited, so there's a difference there, but it's under appendix F on page 49 of the new design committee manual.
Perfect. And okay, so a question regarding condominiums. Condominiums are one tax lot, so they only get 5 trees to protect. Other condo owners, resort, etc., are approximately 25% of all SROA owners. So would they need to contact design committee for discretionary approval?
Yes, that's how the process would work based on the proposed rule that's in place now.
Okay, you answered that quite. All right. So there have been a lot of fast and furious and wordy questions for you that you have handled very efficiently for us, gentlemen. I just want to remind everybody that this forum will be supported by the Sun River U platform on YouTube. You can always download and watch it, or you don't even have to download it. You can just stream it. All comments will be given to the design committee and to SROA. And if you have any further questions or comments that you think of after the fact, please contact SROA Design and put those forward. And what is the date of the meeting that you're going to discuss this? Just in summary?
That's to be determined at this point, because we have to see what questions come in. Once again, this is not part of the so the 60-day read will not end until February 14th. So the plan would be for after February 14th to have a discussion.
Okay.
At that time, based on the recommendation, based on the direction from the board of directors that comes back to the design committee, at that time, there'll be a direction for the next steps.
Well, great. Thank you both for this great informative session. And once again, please, people, just ask if you have further questions. That we have a really great office over there at SROA, and they're happy to answer questions and direct your comments. So thank you very much. I wish everybody a great, safe evening. It looks like we have a wintry weather condition coming on. So everybody please stay safe, and thank you SROA for maintaining our roads so nicely.
Yeah.
Wasn't me personally, but yes, our staff has done a great job. So thanks so much for the support.
Goodbye.
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 Have a nice day.